without further ado, I want to just highlight our friends who are with us here today, Dr. Chad Womack and Dr. Idris Stovall. Dr. Chad Womack is the Senior Director of National STEM Programs and Initiatives at the United Negro College Fund. He's also the director of the newly launched, it was just launched, the UNCF Applied Research Institute for Mathematics and Computational Sciences. That's done also in collaboration with the Thurgood Marshall College Fund and Google. We're really excited about how this institute will create opportunities for HBCU faculty conducting research in data science, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and cybersecurity, and other areas to explore. So we're really excited to have Dr. Womack back here in the AUC. He's a proud graduate of Morehouse College, where he majored in biology and he minored in chemistry and physics. And he also earned a doctorate degree in biomedical sciences from Morehouse School of Medicine. So it's great to have him back. We also have with him Dr. Idris Stovall, whom I've known since I was a graduate student just a couple of years ago. And so Dr. Stovall, he's the founder of the Mathematical Sciences Institute, which houses the Dudley Weldon Woodard Program for Excellence in the Mathematical Sciences. This program prepares underrepresented minority students for persistence in higher education and also for careers. Dr. Stovall is a visiting professor in the Department of Mathematics at the University of Pennsylvania, and also has served as senior mathematician and director of youth programs at Franklin Institute. He's a proud, I guess the other HU, graduate of Hampton University. Otherwise, some people call it Hampton Institute, but it's all good, you know, all HBCU love there. And he also earned his PhD in computational methods in different equations in mathematics from the University of Massachusetts at Amherst. And so we're really excited to have both Dr. Stovall here and Dr. Womack talk about this new institute and how we can all get involved. Welcome.
Well, good afternoon. Thank you, Dr. Talitha Washington. Talitha has been a friend and colleague, and we appreciate the opportunity to share the vision for the Applied Research Institute for Mathematical and Computational Sciences. I will share my screen and get into the presentation. Idris, are we okay on the?
We're all good. I can go ahead and see on my side, and I think we're left side, right sided.
Great. So the Applied Research Institute for Mathematics and Computational Sciences, or ARI, or ARI for short, was an idea and concept that was born out of our experiences with Google research and our experiences with our HBCU faculty. Over the years, we have noticed that there are a lot of research activities happening across the HBCU landscape, but there are also some centers of excellence, such as the Data Science Initiative and others across different schools. And we, in our work with Google, wanted to figure out a way to network our resources and assets. I work for the UNCF. Our colleagues, and let me skip to the next slide. Our colleagues at Thurgood Marshall College Fund have been partners, as well as Dr. Idris Stovall of the Mathematical Sciences Institute and Dr. Faye Cobb-Payton, who's also a Clark Atlanta University graduate. We decided to get together and work together. And as the African proverb would say, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. So this is a come together, go together strategy. And we want to tip our hat to our colleagues who are not here today, but are certainly here in spirit, who are very instrumental in putting together ARI. The vision for ARI is really to establish an HBCU anchored institute that conducts leading edge applied research in a variety of mathematical and computational fields and produces commercially applicable solutions that also have positive social impact. ARI's mission is really to build HBCU research infrastructure and expand capacity for cutting edge research in these areas. Also, innovative pedagogy. We also want to work with our faculty to be in a continual improvement process to improve the curriculum and the pedagogical approaches. in areas like artificial intelligence, machine learning, etc. And so we're very much focused on building a robust pipeline of African American researchers in the mathematical and computational sciences and academic talent that emerges from our campuses to pursue advanced degrees and so forth. But why are we really doing this work now? What are the challenges and opportunities? Well, let's provide some background and context. The higher ed market is dynamic, very competitive, and accelerating towards a model where research and development, commercialization, and entrepreneurship are becoming increasingly important and serving as drivers for wealth creation, sustainability, and institutional resilience. And this will be more and more driven by deep tech innovations. HBCUs, however, have never really been in a position to compete for research dollars or commercialization in the deep tech space due to a variety of factors. Structural racism, for instance, federal agency funding of research has been documented to not fund HBCU researchers or institutions as their white, predominantly white counterparts. Inertia, meaning our institutions have been successful in producing the Black middle class professionals and even STEM graduates. But with regards to R&D and commercialization, that's been a challenge. And then, of course, the lack of leadership that we need, not just on our campuses, but within various sectors, whether it's industry or government, to support the expansion of research capacity. And as a special class of higher institutions, we should plant a flag of success. We have indeed produced STEM talent and produce professionals, et cetera. So it's not that our schools are not successful, but the world has changed. And the world of higher ed, that is. Excuse me. HBCUs need to move collectively in order to accelerate towards wealth creation through research and commercialization and towards sustainability and more resilience. In order to move in this manner, we need a collective impact model that leverages existing assets. We are taking an asset-based approach, not a deficit-based approach, to build collaborative networks and platforms that will transform HBCUs into Tier 1 or R1 research-intensive institutions. Our argument is that that pivot will require the following components. One is access to capital, which drives research. Two is mutually beneficial collaborations and relationships with key stakeholders in the innovation and tech ecosystems. New collaborative model that utilizes distributed leadership and platforms to achieve scalable impact. Backbone organizations like UNCF and Thurgood Marshall College Fund that can serve as honest brokers for partnerships and collaborations. And last and certainly not least, technical and administrative talent. That certainly is a crucial element. So I'm now going to hand the mic over to my colleague, Dr. Stovall, who will dive into the research analysis and background that he's been doing to support this work. Dr. Stovall?
Thank you. And great to dovetail off of you and the way that Ari has been framed. Looking forward to talking more about our approach. From landscape analysis and the way that you queued up, we were definitely not coming at this from a deficit perspective. We wanted to lean into the assets that are there, and aim to utilize that for strategic purposes and doing all the things that were just outlined. Before kind of diving in, I must say, that yes, it's been a good walk with you, Dr. Washington. We've come a long ways, since a New England Board of Higher Education. And part of the talent that comes out of these HBCUs, and all the more reason for the timeliness of this asset as we're describing it in the ecosystem. And what's on the screen now, in our landscape analysis, is yes, we mined the NSF database, and there's lots of good information there, and we were able to download information from the NSF website, NSF database, so that way we could get a sense of what research is being funded by NSF across filter one, which is across HBCUs, We wanted to know by keyword. That was another filter. What are, the nature and more detailed information about, folks who are doing, this work, so that way, ultimately, we could land with, heat map analysis, which gives a visual display of which HBCUs, have, math and computer science and adjacent level expertise, as assets by keyword. Next slide, please. So in terms of, the keyword aspect that goes along to that visualization that you saw in the last slide, and I'll expand a bit more on that a second, but beyond just making sure, that we're looking at the HBCUs, we wanted to go through and see, what are the types of keywords that are necessary, for research, deep learning, deep research, as was framed just a second ago, so that way we can have a more refined search, for those who are already doing the work, funded work, through NSF, that'll be utilized for strategic purposes. So the image on the left, gives an earlier pass, and there's been multiple passes in going through, the, NSF data, that is informed, and substantiated, some of the practices, that Ari is going to go ahead and utilize. And you see how, the keyword list, on the left, was kind of a starter set, one of the earlier passes. And, when we didn't come up with keywords, we refined that through multiple passes where there's no longer the X's, on that left, pane. And you see, more, around the number of hits, by keyword, that we were able to find, and keywords such as autonomous, cybersecurity, cyber physical, machine learning. I'm not going to read that whole list, and as well, we also had a look back at some of the other centers that are on campus as well, and that's also coming up in our future slides. But yes, in terms of refining, the keyword search and our process, this slide goes ahead and gives, a sense of, when we search across those, keywords, we were able to total out the number of HBCUs that have keywords in those abstracts, the total number of those keywords, inside of those awards, and therefore the total number of awards, for HBCUs with those keywords that lends itself to, next slide, heat maps such as, this, and this is a lot of information, and there's no way in the world I'd be able to go ahead and fully unpack, what this visualization represents outside of, those green, boxes, represent, assets, across the keywords that are in the rows, such as artificial intelligence, machine learning, cybersecurity, those which, you saw on the last slide. Across the columns are HBCUs, and, there's, this has evolved over time, whether that be, Google and its president's council, and there's, several HBCUs that are a part of that 10. There's several that are working with, Howard's, University Affiliated Research Center, RITA. There are others who are, in the R2 Carnegie classification, which is a second tier of research, categories for higher educational, institutions. So each of those columns, represent, what is it, as the HBCUs, and the green spots on, the, heat map, lets us know where, the assets are, in terms of, those keywords. Can I have the next slide, please? Another aspect of, of this work in the landscape analysis, and particularly since we were targeting National Science Foundation, and, its, award database, we wanted to go ahead and parse out, the awards that went to, HBCUs as the lead, across the past 5 years, 2018 to 2023, and, aggregate, where, the awards were coming from by, directorate, which, this pie chart represents. And again, it's dense. That's the beauty of our craft, in terms of, visualization, it makes 1,000, words, and looking forward to Q&A on the backside of this. But one of the big things that stands out, on this slide, is, the size of the education, directorate, funding, and if we're looking to go, and while that's extremely valuable, and, HBCUs and their legacy speak load, in the areas where, we want to, in addition to education, but in the areas, where there's, additional opportunity to develop out applied research that could go, commercial, yeah, we need to, continue to figure out ways, and it's nice that Ari is in the business of doing that, to go ahead and have a distribution across areas that, point in the direction of the aforementioned vision and mission for, the Applied Research Institute. Next slide. Lastly, and there's, lots of work, and again, this is, not the time or place, and looking forward to, continuing this work, and, being the asset that, Ari is being developed to be. And here's a table, and it's an incomplete table. It is, through a lot of relationships, a lot of website hunting, where, we wanted to find, again, assets that are happening on HBCU campuses, namely those centers, and initiatives, for us to go ahead and target and be intentional. So you see, Howard, North Carolina, A&T, Prairie View, A&M, several of those that you would expect, have centers or research, going on, and a big special shout out, to the AUCC, Morehouse Spelman, Clark Atlanta, Morehouse School of Medicine, and you see along the columns, those areas: cybersecurity, AI and ML, data science, autonomous systems, computing modeling and simulation. The AUCC has DSI, and it's been a pleasure, to go ahead and, present, in, this forum, so, I think that's the last of my slides, Chad. And I wanted
Thank
to go
you.
pass back to you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Excellent. Um, really appreciate Dr. Stovall's work in the landscape analysis. This is ongoing work. Dr. Stovall and the team will continue to update the information. And I want to say that Dr. Stovall spent a lot of time thinking about how best to access and then filter the data. But we recognize that the analysis is limited and constrained by the database and access to the information. So we're always looking to expand and broaden that access. So we will continue to update that data. But thank you, Dr. Stovall. I appreciate that. Um, Wanted to talk about how we're approaching the capacity building at ARI. How do we support our faculty, recognizing that, quite frankly, a lot of our faculty are doing wonderful things. I think Dr. Stovall's analysis shows that we're not starting from scratch. There's a lot of really good research happening. Certainly, Dr. Talitha Washington and her colleagues at the Data Science Initiative have been helping to drive that agenda in data science across multiple schools. But we also recognize that some faculty have great aspirations for research, but may struggle to bring those ideas into fruition with funding. So ARI set up a faculty workshop model that's a three-stage model that starts with ideation on the left, and moving to the right of this slide goes through a development stage, and then a proposal, revision, and submission phase. I'm happy to say that we have been able to go through the entire workshop stages at the pilot level to support 10 HBCU faculty, and we'll get into those proposals in a minute. But this is the model that we have developed that we want to implement, and on a cycle basis. So the fall would initiate the ideation series where faculty are coming up with ideas or have ideas that they want to hone and sharpen through the development phase. And those are virtual. And then the in-person proposal revision workshops, which is in-person optional, but we're trying to encourage in-person interaction because we also want to encourage networking among faculty. And as we think about beyond the pilot phase, full project awards and so forth, we're thinking about not just individual faculty, but establishing research affinity groups where multiple faculty can get together and network based on their research interests. So, for instance, those faculty conducting artificial intelligence machine learning research, we would intentionally, and we're in the process of doing this now, organize an AIML research affinity group that would stretch across multiple campuses, but with the purpose of not just building social capital, but also real capital being invested through pilot phase awards and then full development project awards. And then one of the things that we want to figure out is how do we network those research affinity groups, so going from A to B to C vertically on the slide, ultimately to establish research communities. And we think that's where a lot of the magic will happen, meaning a lot of the new ideas, collaborations, and partnerships would then come about through that networking of groups. So, and I'll show you this on the next slide, where multiple research affinity groups can begin to collaborate and think about multi-disciplinary or multi-domain partnerships, research partnerships. Our ultimate objective from a financial and funding standpoint is to establish a research fund that would then provide pilot phase awards that then could convert to full project awards at a much higher level. And on the right of the slide, we're rather intentional about the outcomes. We want to make sure that we have robust research projects that will produce tools, research tools and technologies, research networks and communities that will then produce insights and solutions to intractable or complex problems. So an example might be going from left to right, A to C, where you start with faculty and students who have individual interests, but then would sign up for affinity groups that are networked into research communities. It might look like this, where a digital health equity research community would be comprised of individuals who are affiliated with different affinity groups and networks that allow them to collaborate and then ultimately work together to address complex problems to develop solutions. And I want to point out that one of the things that we are passionate about is the commercialization aspects of this. So we are working with several private sector entities, venture capital firms, and UNCF and TMCF itself. We are thinking about establishing investment funds or working with those investment groups that will allow us to seed invest ideas that could then be spun out in the form of startups or licensing that would then have a return back to the ARI network. Everything that we do as a nonprofit goes back to our schools, our faculty, and our students. So we're thinking about ways in which we can make that process robust. Lastly, of the proposals that have been funded at the pilot phase thus far, we did a word cloud to demonstrate the topics, and you can see AI is central among them. That's clearly a hot topic. A lot of our faculty are interested or doing research in those areas, but there are other areas as well that have great interest, and we're trying to support as well. So we're very excited about the next steps. We're working with our partner, Google. We will expand to include other companies as well. We tip our hat to our Google colleagues for their support, and certainly look forward to working with even more faculty, students, and more campuses. So this is the conclusion of our presentation, but we certainly welcome questions from the audience.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that informative presentation and also the landscape view about HBCUs and how we're thinking about research as well as NSF funding. Really informative. So if anybody has any questions, you can put them in the chat or you can put them in the Q&A and I will grab them. Hopefully everybody's had a moment to fill out the poll because now I am seeing results here. So what I'm going to do is take a moment to read the results. And again, you all can put information in the chat if you'd like. So the first question was, what's your status? So 20% are currently enrolled students and 80% are graduated working professionals. So welcome and thanks for joining us today. Please select your gender, about 60% female and 40% male. And where do you currently live? 73% in the wonderful state of Georgia. 20% not in Georgia, and 7% international. So if you like, you can put your location in the chat if you like to say a hello. And one of the questions was, the UNCF was founded in what year? Was it 1806, 1912, 1944, or 1989? Y'all want me to say? So most people selected oh yes, Donna, that's right. 1944. Yes, that's right. Okay, great job. So for the people that said 1989, okay. The UNCF has raised over what amount of funds for students? Is it 5 million, 50 million, 500 million or 5 billion with a B? 5 billion with a B. So we're really thankful for UNCF for providing opportunities for students as well as faculty and staff in pursuing education, research, and now in here. And thank you coming from the Caribbean. Great to have you join with us today. That's fantastic. So I'll just start off by asking the first question. So what led you all down the road to establish this institute? So how did it come about?
It really came about from a set of observations. All of us who have been instrumental in building ARI are scientists, engineer types who love data and are thinking and love our HBCUs. We see our schools as sacred, and we want to make sure that not only are we preserving their vitality, but we're growing. So we take a growth mindset towards our schools. But we observe a few things. One, the world truly has changed for academia over the past few decades. It's accelerated with regards to the role that research and development, commercialization, and entrepreneurship play. And not just for getting grants, but economically and from a financial standpoint, ensuring that higher ed institutions can sustain themselves and can grow and have economic output and impact in their local, regional, and then national levels. And it's increasingly important that our schools, which tend to be tuition driven in terms of their revenue model, expand from that to include research and development. As a rule, we don't, we recognize the special sauce of HBCUs is teaching and learning. We don't want to change that. What we want to do is broaden the mission statement underneath HBCUs to say and or plus R&D, commercialization, and entrepreneurship. On the R side, research, we recognize that while talent is distributed across the HBCU landscape, opportunity is not. And so due to structural racism, which has been long-standing since our HBCUs were founded back in the mid to latter 1800s, we've been challenged with getting the resources from federal agencies or even the private sector, philanthropy, and others to be able to compete. And I want to underscore this point. Research, the game of research, is highly competitive. Majority institutions have been able to compete because the government and private philanthropy has built the capacity over 100 years ago, which the legacy inheritance of those institutions today have been able to leverage to compete in those markets. But we do have, to Dr. Stovall's work in looking at the landscape, we do have assets. The Data Science Initiative is a perfect example of a wonderful asset that's growing and being developed. We want to support those, but we see ourselves at a different level in terms of interaction and engagement to network those centers of excellence and to build a network of networks, if you will, that is self-reinforcing. And what better way to do it than to have the nonprofit organization that raises more money than anybody else combined, UNCF, to support that. So we're here to do that, and I want to hand the mic over to Dr. Stovall. You might want to add. But lastly, we also want to de-balkanize the HBCU community. We know that sometimes we can get clumped in clusters in ways that are non-productive. I'm a proud graduate of Morehouse College and School of Medicine, so I'll let you fill in the blanks on that one. But Dr. Stovall, want to let you add your 2 cents to it as well.
Most certainly, and here on all the things that you said. I think you captured, what is it, the passion, the ethos, that which is a tie that binds amongst those of us, who have been part of this concept. Now bridging that concept to reality, proof of concept, and now being able to iterate. I've been a long-standing member, as part of a community of African American researchers in the mathematical sciences. Talitha and I, and others. You see, I'm data science oriented with regards to all the landscape analysis. The degree to which there's another data point that I wanted to go ahead and mention out loud that actually is a tell and just kind of adds, a color. And it really stood out. So in terms of endowments, if you look at Johns Hopkins, endowment, and you compare that, to the size of the endowments inside of the HBCU sphere. If you take all the HBCUs, add them up, multiply that times 7, and add a little bit more after that, you still fall short, of Johns Hopkins, endowment. All the more reason, that having these type of assets, in the ecosystem that are intentional, and honest brokers, and by folks who get it and have, hopeless love affair, with our institutions, proud alum, and it's nice to be able to connect with other folks who are not just in the HBCUs, because we want to go ahead and, and I love it, the way that, we want to collaborate, surely not, cannibalize. This is a matter of, what is it, win-win, authentic win-wins, and making sure that the asset in the ecosystem, it's not about Idris, or any of us for that matter. It's about the asset in the ecosystem, and being collective minded, and pulling our resources, to a common end. That's a part of the driver, and definitely was part and parcel with why, and, we were, those of us who are on, the concept development side of it, why we've done what we've done, and why we're doing what we're doing on behalf of Ari.
Wonderful. And so one of the topics you mentioned was artificial intelligence, which is a, we'll say, popular and important topic. We see it in the CHIPS and Science Act as identified as like almost the #1 if they ordered them, one of the 10 key technology areas. And NIST is also in the process of launching a U.S. Artificial Intelligence Safety Institute. So how do you see artificial intelligence happening? Like, what are you seeing with respect to artificial intelligence at HBCUs, and where do you envision it to go?
That's a great question. Ultimately, we don't know where it's going to go. It's going to be driven by folks like yourself and your colleagues at DSI and others. It's exciting, but it can also be terrifying. We're looking at technology that's nascent, and will continue to become increasingly sophisticated. If we look at large language models, for instance, which drives a lot of the natural language processing and the AI systems, we Black folks run the risk of suffering from the algorithms that are being developed because we're not included. We're happy that there are scientists and faculty at some of our schools that are trying to do just that, build models that are inclusive and not exclusive. But that kind of work needs to be ramped up a bit and networked, meaning how can we learn from each other and not in isolation from the larger ecosystem. So we think it's critical that ARI serve as a bridge to connect our faculty to tier 1 institutions, so that there's intellectual exchange in both directions. We want to do away with this idea that the HBCU community can't contribute. Obviously we can, but those bridges aren't necessarily there. And so that's part of the mission. So in fields like AI and ML, we want to make sure that our faculty have the resources and access to opportunities to build out their own models, connect to the ecosystem, and our students have access to summer research opportunities, and then graduate schools where they can pursue advanced degrees to become the next generation of AI engineers. This is a brave new world, and I think we will continue to monitor the new directions that the science and the technology is going in, making sure that we're plugged in.
I'll add that, in terms of, our choice of spaces to go ahead and, seed and pilot, you probably saw that there were multiple columns, AI and ML, cybersecurity, transportation, of course, data science, computational modeling and simulations, and part of the reason why, you saw it in the cloud, AI and ML is showing up, as a big topic because it spans, multiple, areas, and, yes, it is a game changer, and the degree to which, we monitor, we be, intentional, we be, innovative, in ways that it gets utilized, particularly in education too. Education oftentimes, gets lost in the mix, which is why we at RE, we're intentional, not just on, the research side, but, also on the pedagogy and research associated with pedagogy, side as well. I'm really excited about, the direction of, that we're headed in, given the game changer that AI and ML is, and all the more reason that these, STEM skills, and, alliances, allegiances, to be opportunistic so that way, the data, that comes along with the algorithms, the machine learning and all that comes in that space of AI and ML, that we're at the forefront of it, as, contributors, beneficiaries for authentic win-win, so yeah, AI and ML is definitely, a game changer. And that was no accident why we chose that as, kind of the first, affinity to lean into.
Fantastic. So Dr. Womack, you talked about the coming building relationships between R1 institutions and HBCUs. What makes a good partnership between the two entities? And then I often hear HBCUs don't know how to find R1 partners, and then R1 partners don't know how to find HBCU. And then how do we make that work? What are your insights around that?
Yeah, another very good question. Sometimes it's very tricky. Those relationships between HBCUs or minority serving institutions and R1 research intensive institutions is not mutually beneficial sometimes in the past. They've been parasitic or not balanced. So obviously that's our goal, is to make sure that they're mutually beneficial. We believe strongly that HBCUs have something to contribute to the ecosystem. We've actually modeled this somewhat with Princeton University through the PACRE model. So the Princeton group reached out to UNCF several years ago in response to what was happening with George Floyd and Black Lives Matter. And they wanted to figure that out. How could Princeton serve as a partner that would build authentically mutually beneficial relationships with HBCU researchers? So we worked with Princeton, and I want to tip my hat to them as well. I think they did a very good job, and they were very thoughtful about it. They recognized they didn't know everything about the HBCU community. So it starts with the data: who's doing what, where are the areas of alignment, and we were able to work with Princeton and the PACRE initiative to launch the PACRE research effort, where HBCU research faculty matched with Princeton faculty, submitted proposals together collaboratively, and now they're on their second cohort. So it is possible, even with an Ivy League institution. And HBCU faculty that are participating are from all over. They're not just from one HBCU. There are other schools like Princeton that are wanting to do something very similar, and also companies. So we believe RE represents an honest broker, a backbone organization, because it really is the birth child of UNCF and Thurgood Marshall College Fund. It's always, I think, and this is just my personal opinion, my mother used to tell me, God bless the child that's got its own. So when we come into a situation where we're trying to partner and collaborate with well-endowed institutions, we need to have our own. And so part of what we're trying to do is make sure that we are supporting faculty, centers of excellence like DSI and others, so that they're resourced at a level where they can entertain more mutually beneficial partnerships.
That question wasn't necessarily to me, but I will add slight color,
Yes.
in the following, sense. It's been, great working with UNCF and TMCF, and, Chad and, Eric, Hart, who's not here, I want to, salute, in terms of, what is it, their work with regards to UNCF and TMCF. This hasn't been done before, so it's been really cool. Well, let me be careful how I say that, that I know of, but it's really cool to go ahead and see an accelerant, in terms of, what is it, champions, in those spaces, on behalf, of Ari, and, there was some intentionality, you may recall, in our slide deck, that had the triangle, at, the tip of it, pardon me using tip and triangle, in the same sentence, but the vertices on that triangle, were intentional. One vertex being dedicated, to clusters of HBCUs, being mindful of those assets that are there. Another tip, being with predominantly white institutions. For instance, for example, there's other examples and folks doing amazing work, outside in PWI space. We want to honor that. And then the third tip, being, with industry and government partners. I just, it was just minor color because everything that you said, Chad, and it's been a pleasure and an honor working with you, good brother. We're soldiers and comrades in this work, and it's cool, to have a forum, where, yeah, we're of like-minded folks, and DSI, in the building and all those who are in attendance, to, this and see it on whenever they see it, of like-minded folks so that way we can get, collectively strong. And there is some intentionality to that triangle. I wouldn't say anything differently than what you already said, good brother, Dr. Chad Womack.
Right. Great. And Dr. Stovall, you've been really in the trenches with communities in building pipelines and pathways for underrepresented communities. And the Biden administration has put out a number of information items that looks to strengthen racial equity and support for underserved communities across the federal government, including funding. And just recently, in December of 2023, Biden signed a historic executive order to usher in the next era of tribal self-determination where they own their data. And so how do you see the Biden administration and how they're thinking about promoting, we'll say, racial equity in these community partnerships? How do you see that as an opportunity for HBCUs to, we'll say, leverage to advance the work in data science, artificial intelligence, machine learning, cybersecurity, quantum, and all of these other, I think, fun and important topics?
Great question. And, part of the beauty of this ride that I've been on, professionally, and I don't fit well in boxes. And that's why, I'm all over the place, in terms of MSI and, the Applied Research Institute, building higher ed K-12 partnerships. Yes, I do maintain, a visiting, scholar's position with the University of Pennsylvania, is, that, and I'm borrowing words from a colleague, this, the Biden administration, and, we need to continue to, from the bully pulpit, put that this is an investment. This isn't charity, work, and the degree to which, you cut your nose to spite your face, when you don't go ahead, and, position things as investment, and the degree to which, there's some intentionality, with the CHIPS Act, the Biden administration, and there is, some in a zeitgeist of the moment, if we're, diligent about the moment, because as we know, sometimes these moments, can, be fleeting, and we definitely don't want this, to fall short of a movement, and, in light of the moment, so yes, that, investment, through the Biden administration, is timely, for those of us who are about this work, particularly not just with targeting HBCUs, but higher ed K-12 partnerships, there's a whole STEM, evangelism, that's, needed. And again, it's nice, to be working with colleagues and comrades, in this space, so, and developing our programs and initiatives, on, said, funding, so, and I'm not alone. There's, a collective folks. So to be able to connect the dots, I think is timely in the zeitgeist.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question, Talitha. I think, um, we go through these boom bust political cycles when certain administrations come into the White House and are able to work with Congress to push out initiatives like the CHIPS Act. Um, but the challenge that and the somewhat frustration I have on that is because a lot of times we're not ready to go after the
Mm.
opportunities that come down the pipe because we haven't really built out the infrastructure to do that collectively. So what happens is you have individual schools that might benefit, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But collectively speaking, um, there really hasn't been a coming together. So, for instance, what you've done with DSI is critical. It's an example of an asset that's being built that will allow for groups of schools to develop an agenda so that if, let's say, tomorrow, President Biden and Vice President Harris, a Howard grad, of course, say, we want a data science initiative that's going to transform and revolutionize data science and analytics, you're prepared to go after that because you've already built that apparatus. So I think we need more of that, and then we need to network those things. And as much as we are federal government facing, we ought to be private sector facing too, so that we have the benefit of both. That's where we can have an engine that drives wealth for our institutions and for our community.
In driving the innovation. I totally agree. And here in the AUC, we're if the appropriations gets passed, we're in the appropriations request to stand up a high performance computing center
Right.
at the amazing AUC Robert Woodruff Library. So more to come with that once it goes through. And supercomputing is another one of the key technology areas in the CHIPS and Science Act. So super excited about bringing resources here and also to other HBCUs. So I
Absolutely.
think we have a question in the chat. She says, Dr. Womack, I like that phrase. God bless the child that got his own or her own. I agree. They have a question. How can we as HBCUs keep that and strengthen that and stay competitive? How early do we start?
Mm.
What are the things that we need to put in place so that we stay ready, right? So Donna, I'm gonna give you one more quote. If you stay ready, you don't have to get ready. So what are the things that we need to put in place? Because when we talked about the high performance computing, we were preparing for it before we even developed a partnership, right? It wasn't like, oh, let's do it, right? And we're still working diligently on that. So what do we need to, what infrastructure, processes, resources do we need to put in place so that we HBCUs are competitive and ready for all this new innovations?
Yeah, it's a wonderful question. Definitely, we need leadership. I keep pushing on this issue as I talk and work with our colleagues that we need more of you, Talitha. We need more Talithas. We need more Dr. Stovalls in our community to exercise leadership around the importance of STEM education, the importance of research and development, and the importance of commercialization.
Mm.
For a very long time, our schools and our community have been in a posture of service, and that's fine. Again, shouldn't change that. That's the secret sauce of our schools. But we need to broaden the mission a bit and really get into the space of innovation and research and make sure that we are competing in that space. I am a firm believer, I know Dr. Stovall feels this way too, that we have a lot to contribute. So leadership is key. Number two is capital. An idea is great, but an idea plus money is a whole lot better. So I'm going to put out an appeal to everyone watching and listening. I need the community to say to the UNCF, we need more funding to support our researchers, our faculty, our students. What are you guys doing about that? Because what I'm going to do is leverage that internally to say, yeah, that's exactly right, which is why we're building endowed funds to support like DSI. Wouldn't it be great if we had an endowed fund at UNCF that would help support DSI in perpetuity. So you can have your cake and eat it too with the icing, you know. So UNCF is a fund. We represent capital and hope. So the more that we can raise money to support these initiatives around the HBCU landscape, the better. Third thing is we need not be afraid to get out there in the marketplace and translate our ideas into solutions that have commercial value yet positive social impact. I do not see those things as mutually exclusive. So I actually think that, and you know, I've been privileged and blessed to through the programs that UNCF work with HBCU students. I gotta tell you, every time I see these students that come to our programs and our events, I get excited all over again because they're bright, they're highly motivated, they're energetic, and they're entrepreneurial and they're innovative. So more we can encourage our young folks to take leadership roles, understand what risk is about, manage that so that they can develop solutions for the future. I think the more we can do that, the better off we are. So I think those are some of the components of how we do this.
Right. Dr. Stovall?
Matter of fact, I was sitting there enjoying the comments, you know, so all I'm going to do is echo them because I can't articulate it better, you know, and just looking forward to continuing, you know, this work. And, you know, yeah, let's be collective minded, y'all, you know, and, you know, that was a pretty big offer, you know, so I'm hoping folks take heed to it so that way, you know, we can arm, you know, our brother, you know, sister and everybody in between, you know, to make similar, you know, cases for this cause.
Yeah.
Wonderful. And Dr. Womack, don't worry, I'm sure my team will take you up on that offer. As we are diligently planning for this scholarship gala, and as you have said, you all are the experts. So we will be calling and we'll be asking. So I just want to give you a heads up and thank you for challenging us all to really think about how we're partnering, how we're leveraging, and how we're building capacity in all things data science, AI, and really just making more opportunities for faculty, for students, and also for our community partners, both at other institutions, industry, and government. So thank you so much, Dr. Stovall, Dr. Womack, for joining us today. And I agree. Somebody put in the chat to write a letter to Tyler Perry and Oprah Winfrey.
Right.
Two of my favorites. Yes, and you know, you can write to them as well as your elected representatives to remind people about how these technologies impact our communities. So thanks again for joining us. We'll be back in the second week of February with Dr. Thomas Searles for a discussion on quantum at HBCU. So everybody have a great rest of your day and a wonderful weekend. Thanks again.
Thank you all.